Hey guys, welcome to Friday Crime Club. I'm your host, Joey, and thank you for having me. Thank you for being here. Here on Fridays, we discuss true crime cases, so if that's something that you're interested in, then please join us. We'd love to have you. Today, we're going to be talking about, it's actually been 20 years this year. It's one of the first true, internet era crimes, because it happened, I think it was 5 days after Facebook started, and that's the case of Maura Murray. She disappeared back in 2004 when she was 21. But before we start, I just want to say, if you like what you see, like what you hear, then please like, subscribe, do the whole thing, and if you're ready, then why don't we go ahead and jump into the case, shall we? Maura Murray was born on May 4th, 1982 in Hanson, Massachusetts. She was the youngest. She had siblings, Fred Jr., Kathleen, and Julie, and half-brother Curtis. Her parents are Fred, who was a nuclear medicine tech, and Lori, who was a nurse. Her parents divorced when she was 6, and she primarily lived with her mother after that. Maura graduated from Whitman-Hanson Regional High School, and she was a star athlete on their track team. She then did a year at the United States Military Academy in West Point, New York, before transferring to the University of Massachusetts Amherst to study nursing. So while Maura was at the military academy, she ended up stealing what her sister Julie later said was less than $5 of makeup at a store on the base. And she ended up confessing immediately, and so her sister thinks that maybe this was a way of, at least subconsciously, and I don't want to put words in her mouth, but this is what I read, that maybe she did this so that she could get kicked out of school. But by admitting guilt, she didn't have to go in front of the honor board, so she actually didn't get kicked out. She ended up transferring, so taking her credits and transferring to another school for nursing. And so at the military academy, she started going out with her boyfriend Bill. And so when she went to the second school and he ended up being stationed at a military base, they ended up doing long distance. So at her second school, the University of Massachusetts Amherst, where, like I said, she was studying nursing, she actually got into a little bit of trouble there as well. Around 3 months before her disappearance, she got caught using somebody else's credit card number. So she admitted to using a stolen credit card to buy food from multiple restaurants. And so she confessed, but she was placed on 3 months probation. And if she could get through 3 months of, laying low and staying quiet, her record would end up being clean, which would have brought her up right until she disappeared, was around the 3-month mark. Julie later said that while she was doing her own research and investigating Maura's disappearance, she actually found out that Maura was seeing a counselor, and she talked to that counselor, and the counselor said that Maura was exhibiting signs of an eating disorder, which from what I've read, I don't know much about eating disorders, but from what I've read, buying a lot of food that is something that people with eating disorders do. So the evening of February 5th is when things kind of started getting out of hand. Maura was at her security job. She was working at the university. She was checking IDs. And that night she actually spoke with her sister Kathleen. They discussed Kathleen's relationship problems. Kathleen had just gotten out of rehab, and she was telling Maura that her fiance went to get her at the rehab center, and on the way back, he stopped at a liquor store and she ended up relapsing. At 12:06 that night, she spoke to Bill, but Bill later said that nothing really stood out for him during that call, and he said that Maura didn't seem upset. At 12:40 a.m., she received a phone call from the security phone at her job, but nobody seems to know what was actually discussed on that phone call. Later that night, Maura actually broke down in tears. Apparently, she was so distraught that her supervisor was actually called down because she wasn't doing her job. Her supervisor later said that when they got there, Maura seemed kind of almost catatonic. She was reportedly unresponsive and completely zoned out. So around 1:20 a.m., her supervisor brought her back to her dorm, and the supervisor later said that Maura kept saying, "my sister." I listened to a podcast that Julie, Maura's sister, was interviewed on, and she said that she doesn't know to this day what "my sister" meant. She has suspicions, but she doesn't know for sure what that whole thing was about. Julie doesn't know if Maura was talking about Kathleen or her, Julie. Julie also said that Maura was sharing a cell phone plan with Bill, and so if Maura had been talking to other guys, it would make sense for Maura to use the security phone to do that, and not use her cell phone so that Bill wouldn't find out. That's just something that Julie pointed out. I don't know if she thinks that. I don't know. I don't want to, like I said, I don't want to put words in Julie's mouth. But there are also reports, and Julie's also talked about this, that Maura, because her and Bill were off and on, during one of their breakups, she was actually seeing somebody else. He was actually a track coach at Maura's school. He was in his early 20s. I've also seen Kathleen mention this, that maybe Maura said "my sister" and she was acting distraught so that she could get out of her job that night. But I don't know if I believe that. It seems like a lot of work to just get out of work, I don't know, anything is possible though. So on February 7th, Fred, Maura's dad, showed up in Amherst. They were gonna go buy a car for Maura because the car that she had was really run down and it wasn't working well. But he was going with her to look at potential cars, and so there's a lot of, the internet has made a big issue out of this, that apparently Fred went to multiple ATMs to get money out of the ATM, out of his bank account. Some people think that this is suspicious, I think. But Julie clarified that, and she said that Fred did that because he wanted like a bargaining chip. He wanted cash to bargain with when they went to buy a car. So they went to look at cars, and later that night, Fred and Maura and one of Maura's friends went to dinner. After dinner, she borrowed Fred's car and she dropped him off at the hotel that he was staying at, and her friend went back to the university because they wanted to go to a dorm party. So Maura's friend Sarah is actually the one that hosted the party. Her and Maura worked together at an art gallery at Maura's second job. And but from what I've read on the internet, Sarah was asleep the whole time. And so she can't speak about what happened at the party, which I find very strange. Like, the whole party thing is so full of rumors, and I couldn't come to a conclusion. Like, I don't know if the party is important. I don't know if anything important happened at the party, but I do find it strange that Sarah says that she doesn't remember anything from the party because she was sleeping. But anyway, I'd like to know what you guys think about that though. So her friend Kate, she's the one that went to dinner with Fred and Maura. She was at the party as well, but she doesn't remember if Sarah was sleeping or not. So Maura left around 2 a.m. to go to the hotel and bring the car back. Kate tried stopping her because she had been drinking, but Maura decided to go anyway. So she left at 2:30, and at 3:30 a.m. she actually got into an accident. She hit a guardrail and she ended up totaling the car. So the police came, but the strange thing is that they didn't do a sobriety test, and I'm really curious as to why. Even if Maura didn't seem drunk, which is a possibility, she was a young college student driving in the middle of the night. I don't know, I just find it really strange that they didn't test for that. But maybe they didn't have a reason to, I don't know. I wasn't there, but anyway. The police report said driver unattentiveness, and that's what they put as the reason for the accident. She had apparently slipped on debris. So she got a ride from a tow truck to where her dad was staying. And so she didn't have a key to the room, so she had a hard time gaining access to the room. I don't know exactly. I think they didn't want to give her a key, or like they didn't know who she was. Maybe I'm really not sure. But she slept in the lobby for a while until she was able to gain access to the room. So from what I read, they know that Maura actually made it into Fred's room by 4:49 a.m. because at that time she made a phone call from Fred's phone to Bill. But the contents of that phone call, again, are not known, at least publicly. So the next morning, Maura told Fred what happened, and Fred called his insurance company, and he found out that it was actually going to be all covered. So he got a rental, and he drove Maura back to school. So he then leaves to go back home. So that night at 11:30, Fred calls Maura and reminds her to get some accident forms because they need to fill that out for the insurance claim. So they agreed that they would talk the night after so that they could fill out the insurance claim together. So now we're on Monday, February 9th. After midnight, Maura uses her computer to search MapQuest for directions to the Berkshires, which are some highlands in Massachusetts and Connecticut, and for Burlington in Vermont. At 1 p.m. she emailed her boyfriend and she said, "I love you more, stud. I got your messages, but honestly, I didn't feel like talking too much of anyone. I promised to call today though. Love you, Maura." She then made a call to talk about renting a condo in Bartlett, New Hampshire, where her and her family had vacationed in the past. The call lasted 3 minutes, but she ended up not renting it. At 1:13, she called another student at the nursing school, but again, there's no record on the internet that I could find about what that call was about. At 1:24, she emailed a work supervisor at the school, and she said that she was going to be out of the school for a week because there was a death in the family, but turns out there wasn't. At 2:05, she called a number that gives out booking information for places in Stowe in Vermont. At 2:18, she called Bill and she left a voicemail saying that they would talk later. That call lasted for about a minute. For her trip, she had packed clothes, toiletries, textbooks, and birth control pills. At 3:30, she left campus. There was actually a snowstorm that day, so the classes were canceled. So when she left, she was driving a Saturn S series. She had been told by her dad to not drive it because it wasn't in good condition. But he did say that if she was going to drive it, to put a rag in the tailpipe so that she wouldn't get stopped by police and ticketed because of the smoke that came out of the tailpipe. So early that morning, I've seen it reported that she was looking up maternity terms on the internet, which kind of gave way to speculation that maybe she had been pregnant. But Julie, her sister, actually said that that was part of one of her assignments. There was an assignment that she had to do that was literally looking up maternity terms. She was actually just doing that assignment, and she ended up submitting that assignment that morning. At 3:40 p.m. that day, she was captured on camera at an ATM machine where she withdrew $280, which was most of her money in her bank account. She was alone. She then went to a liquor store where she bought $40 worth of alcohol, and during the day she had also gotten the accident forms as well. She checked her voicemail at 4:37 p.m., which was the last time that she used her phone. So around 7 p.m., a resident on Route 112 in Haverhill, New Hampshire heard a loud noise outside. She saw a car against a snowbank pointing west on the eastbound side. At 7:27, she reported it to the police. She mentioned on the call that she saw a man sitting in the car smoking a cigarette. She later said, though, that that was most likely a cell phone that she saw. So around that time, a school bus driver that lived close actually drove by, and so he stopped and he talked to Maura. He offered to call for help, but Maura told him that she had already called AAA and that they were on their way. But he knew right away that that wasn't true because there's no cell phone signal where they were. And he knew this because he lived not too far away. So he left, and when he got to his home, he called police from there and they were dispatched. He later stated that he saw multiple cars pass by where Maura had her accident between the time that he called the police and by the time that they showed up. Officially, police arrived at the scene at 7:46, but there was no one there. Maura was gone. The left headlight was damaged because it had hit a tree. The car's radiator was pushed into the fan. The windshield was cracked on the driver's side, and both airbags were deployed. The car was locked. Inside and outside were red stains, which the police later confirmed that was wine. Inside was an empty beer bottle and the damaged box of wine that she had bought. The receipt for the liquor store purchase was found in her abandoned car. A lot has been made of Maura buying a lot of liquor, but Julie later said that what Maura actually bought were the ingredients to one of her favorite drinks, a Black Russian, and that the wine that was in the car was actually bought on Saturday for the dorm party. Julie also mentioned that when Maura went to the liquor store, she actually recycled 79 cans for a total of $3.95. And people seem to think that that's a little bit strange if you decide to leave and never come back. With that in mind, it kind of seems like Maura didn't plan on leaving or never coming back. It's just an odd thing for you to do if you would decide to disappear. They also found the AAA card in the car in Maura's name. They also found blank accident forms, some gloves, some CDs, makeup, jewelry, the driving directions she had printed out, her favorite stuffed animal, and there was also a book in the car as well called Not Without Peril. And there's been a lot of discourse about this book in relation to Maura, because it's about, and I quote, misadventures in the White Mountains of New Hampshire that end in death. But her sister Julie actually explained that she was with Maura when they bought the book, and it became one of Maura's favorite books, but they had it signed by the author when they bought it, and it was just a book that really meant a lot to her. I don't think it played into her disappearance at all, to be honest. They also didn't find her debit cards or her credit cards, or her phone, but none of them have been used since that night. Julie also said that there was a handwritten number in Maura's car. Julie, in recent years, she called that number and she found out that the person on the other line actually had connections to Maura's hometown. I don't know if it's related to her disappearance. Maybe it was just in the car for years and years and years. It's very possible that it had nothing to do with that night, and it's also possible that it was. But I don't want to speculate, I don't want to accuse, but I did want to mention it. There was also a form in the car for New Hampshire because Maura had gotten a speeding ticket there and they had suspended her license. If she wanted it again, she needed to fill out that form and bring it there in person. That night, between 8 and 8:30, a contractor was driving home and he actually came across somebody walking quickly on foot eastbound on the 112. And that's around 8 kilometers from the accident site. That person was wearing jeans with a dark coat and a light-colored hood. He actually didn't report this until 3 months later when he was looking at his work records and he realized that he saw this person the same night that Maura had disappeared. Around 8 p.m., EMS and fire trucks arrived to clear the scene. At 8:49, it was towed, and at 9:30, the officer left. They actually found a rag in the tailpipe, but like I mentioned earlier, this is something that Fred told Maura to do, to keep the smoke from coming out. The next day, a bolo, be on the lookout, was issued. She was reported as wearing jeans, a dark coat, and having a black backpack. I can't help but wonder if, because it's very similar to what that contractor said he saw that person wearing along the side of the road, so this is just my opinion, but I'm wondering if maybe that was Maura, right? So a voicemail was left on Fred's home phone by the police saying that the car was found abandoned, but Fred was working out of town, so he didn't receive that message until way later on. Kathleen actually called him to let him know what was happening. Fred then called the police, and the police told him that they would start a search in the morning if she hadn't showed up by then. So Fred arrived at dawn, and by 8 a.m., the Hampshire fishing game and the family started their search for Maura. A tracking dog, using one of her gloves, tracked her scent 100 yards east from where the vehicle was. This made police think that maybe she got into someone else's vehicle. But Julie has talked about this, though. The family has an issue with the gloves being used to track Maura's scent. because apparently Maura had received them as a gift for Christmas, but she had never worn them. So they're critical of the police using that to track her scent. I'm thinking, how do they know that Maura hadn't used them though if she was gone at college, right? But at the same time, there were so many things that they could have used that was in the car also that the family would have agreed was more likely to have been worn by Maura. That's just, again, something I wanted to bring up. So by 5 p.m., Bill and his parents arrived. He was first interrogated alone and then later with his parents. Later that night, police said they thought that Maura came here to either leave or take her own life, but the family don't agree with this. Bill had actually turned off his cell phone during his flight to Haverhill. When he turned the phone back on, he realized that he had actually received a voicemail while it was turned off. By listening to the voicemail, he believed that he could hear the sound of Maura sobbing. The call was traced to a calling card used by the American Red Cross, but Fred actually heard that voicemail. He's the only one, I believe, who heard the voicemail besides Bill, but he said that it didn't sound like Maura at all. He said it didn't really sound like anything at all. The FBI joined the investigation 10 days after Maura disappeared. During one of the searches, one of Maura's sisters actually found a pair of ripped underwear, but the police confirmed that that wasn't Maura's. The police also investigated Maura's room at the university, and they said that everything was packed into boxes when they got there, and posters were taken down, and it was almost like Maura left and didn't intend on coming back. And they also said that there was a printed out email on top of one of the boxes from Bill, that Maura maybe had left that there as a motive or an explanation as to why she was leaving. But Julie said on one of the podcasts that she did that not long before her disappearance, Maura's mother and brother, they actually visited her in her dorm, and Fred said that boxes were the same. It was everywhere and nothing was unpacked. And Fred actually saw Maura's room after her disappearance, and he actually said that it was more unpacked than it was when he visited. And Julie also said that the email that the police made a big deal out of was actually just a note that was printed out, and it was in one of Maura's books, but that it wasn't left on top as they claimed. At the end of February, the police returned Maura's belongings to her family, and eventually the family returned home. But Fred came back nearly every weekend to look for Maura. And there were actually complaints made about him because he was caught on multiple occasions trespassing on private property while looking for Maura. In a press release, the police said that they believed that Maura was headed for an unknown destination and may have accepted a ride in order to continue to that destination. In July, the police went back to the family because they wanted the items that they had given them earlier back so that they can do forensic analysis. In mid-July, the police did a 1-mile radius search around Maura's disappearance area because now that the snow had melted, they wanted to have another look and see if they could find more evidence, but they didn't find anything. Also later that year, a man gave Fred a bloody knife that he said belonged to his brother, and he lived less than a mile from where Maura disappeared. That man said that his brother and his girlfriend were acting strange right after Maura's disappearance, and that he thought that maybe that knife was used to murder Maura. And to make matters even stranger, a few days after this conversation, that man's brother actually scrapped his Volvo. But however, his family claimed that the man made up that story in order to get the reward money because he was a drug addict. In late 2005, there was a user on a message board named Tom Davies who said that he found a backpack 48 kilometers away from the disappearance site behind a public bathroom. The police said that they were aware of this, but they didn't say publicly what came out of that, if anything. Fred, though, kept Maura's memory alive. They all did, the whole family did, but Fred did a lot of talk shows. He went on the Montel Williams show. He just wanted to publicize the case as much as he could. I know on the internet a lot of people think that Fred's actions around the time of Maura's disappearance, before and after, some of that was suspicious. I don't know if I lean into that. It just seems like he did a lot to keep the case alive, and it just wouldn't make sense to me if he did that if he had anything to do with it. But I think he was just a father trying to find his daughter. I don't think there was anything suspicious in that, in everything that he did in his actions. But, I'd like to hear what you guys think about that. In 2006, volunteers did a 2-day search around where Maura disappeared. Cadaver dogs led police to the closet of the house of the brother who gave Fred the knife. Police took a sample of the carpet, but they didn't release the results publicly. And Fred thinks that his daughter actually died at that house. In 2021, the tree at the crash site was cut down by the owner. There was a blue ribbon on it, and the tree acted like a sort of memorial for Maura. Also in 2021, bone fragments were found at Loon Mountain in Lincoln, New Hampshire, about 40 kilometers from the crash site, but police confirmed it wasn't Maura. In 2024, officials released an age progression photo of Maura. Maura's mother and Kathleen, Maura's sister, have since died, both from cancer. Maura's mother, Lori, actually died in 2009 on Maura's birthday. Julie has been hard at work keeping Maura's case alive. She does a lot of podcasts. She has a TikTok. The family has a website dedicated to Maura, Mauramurraymissing.org. Fred still searches for her, but both he and Julie believe that she's dead. And as for Bill, well, he was accused of sexual misconduct by multiple women. And from what I understand, he was charged with third-degree sex abuse. I think he ended up pleading guilty to a lesser offense or a misdemeanor, but yeah. But besides that, unfortunately, that's kind of where the story ends. In recent years, there hasn't been much leads, at least released publicly. But I'd like to know what you guys think, because there's a lot of discourse on the internet. Some people think that Maura disappeared voluntarily, that she's in Canada, or she's just living her life, just having disappeared voluntarily. And there's a lot of people who think she was murdered. There's a lot of people who think that she took her own life. And there's a lot of people who think that she got lost in the woods and she died. And like I said, there's a lot of people that think that Fred is involved. Personally, I don't. Like I said, I think he was just a father grieving his daughter and trying to find her and bring her home. But I'd like to hear your arguments about that. I also want to speak on the theory that she disappeared voluntarily. As much as that would be a good outcome for her to still be alive and safe, I have to wonder how credible that is, right? Like, she had obviously been drinking that day. So if she had disappeared voluntarily, if she had planned this, first of all, she couldn't have planned that accident. She could have gotten killed in that accident. The airbags came out. So she would have left that up to chance. And then she had been drinking on top of that. So if you were disappearing voluntarily, why would you drink, right? Like, why would you not want to be sober for that? So I don't think that is credible. But again, I'm open to suggestions. I'd love to hear your thoughts. That house though, with the brother and the girlfriend, with the police dogs go in there and the police taking some carpet, there has to be something there. But again, I don't know if that's really what happened with Maura though. Like, I tend to go back to the idea that she went into the woods. I know that there was a lot of snowbanks and that the police didn't see any footprints around the vehicle going into the woods. So I don't think she went into the woods at the site of the accident, but I think she was drinking. She got into an accident. She was on probation, and she knew that if she got a DUI, things would be so much worse. I think she got into that accident and she panicked. I think she went down that road after the accident for a while. She went walking down that road. Maybe she was trying to find food, a gas station, a phone. Maybe she couldn't find her cell phone, so she wanted to find a phone. I don't know. But I think at some point she was walking down that road, which is when that guy saw her, which I do believe who he saw was Maura. And I think that maybe at some point she heard sirens or she got scared, and somewhere along the way, there she went into the woods to hide or to wait it out. But then she got lost, and I think that she is still in those woods somewhere, and which is sad to think about, but I think that is the most likely outcome, at least in my opinion. And if she wanted to end her life, I don't know, like, that's always a possibility, and I know that a lot of the time that's an impulsive thing, but she grabbed those accident forms. She gave an excuse at school to be gone for a week. I don't know. I don't know where I lean on that. I don't know if I believe that. I think, I always go back to the getting lost in the woods. That's my theory. And I just want to point out, though, before I go, there was a book written on Maura's disappearance, True Crime Addict, How I Lost Myself in the Mysterious Disappearance of Maura Murray by James Renner. I read it. I don't know if there was any new theories in there. I know that the family pretty much distanced themselves from the book and from the author, so I didn't want to talk too much about the book, but I did want to bring it up though. So what are your theories? Do you think she was murdered? Do you think she disappeared voluntarily? Do you think that she took her own life? Or do you think, like me, that she died by misadventure? She's in those woods somewhere, as sad as that is. But when Maura was last seen, she was 5'7". She weighed between 120 and 125 pounds. She has green-blue eyes, she has light brown hair, and she has dimples on both cheeks, and she has some fillings and some crowns as well. If you have any information on Maura at all, please contact the New Hampshire State Police at 603-271-2663 or email coldcaseunit@dos.nh.gov, or you can also contact FBI ViCAP at 1-800-634-4097 or email vicap@fbi.gov. So that's all the information that I have on Maura. Again, thank you for being here. I'm going to be here again on Fridays. It's what we do. So like, subscribe, and I hope to see you next time. Thanks. Bye.